So in this video, I'm going to cover some basic game mechanics. And we're going to start with the counters. You can see here, I put the counters out. This is the French, the Spanish, the Prussian, the Austrian, the Russian, the Turkish, and the British. These are counters that will be on the board moving around the board. This number is the movement number. Now if you notice, the French movement number is a 4. All the others are a 3. So the French have a built-in movement that's better than everybody else. It's just, I don't need to go into details of why they do that, but you guys are used to it. Like, let's say that counter is on the board. Well, how many factors are in that counter is actually what you're keeping on your sheet of paper that I gave you that looks like this, that you're going to keep track of. Nobody is going to know, not even me, of how many forces you have in that factor until you get into a battle. So you'll keep track of that yourself. But this is the strategic rating. If you don't have a commander present while this corps fights, you will use that when it comes involved. It only comes involved like when you try to outflank. This is the tactical rating. That will only come involved for like adding up the combat resolution to see if your tactics are better than the opponent. And you can see Napoleon's, this is the French, is 2 is better than every other force except the Russian and the British. And then this is the infantry morale of all the French. Regular French infantry are a 4. This is the cavalry morale. They would be a 4 if they're in that corps. And then the same for this, the infantry morale. You can see the French morale is better. And this is 3 less. This is 3. However, the cavalry, for the Austrians, morale is a 4. This one's the Spanish. You can see the Spanish cavalry is the same morale as their infantry. But this, the cavalry's better. This, the Russians, morale's a 3. But look at the British. The British morale's 4.5. So they're a little bit better than the French. And then they don't have a cavalry morale. That means if there's cavalry in this, they just use the infantry morale. And then this is the Turks. A morale of a 3. Again, any cavalry in there, they'll use that. So that's what the numbers mean. They don't mean a lot to you right now, but when you get in a battle, you'll just know offhand that the French numbers are pretty consistently higher than everybody's except the British. So that's a good thing. Now, if you look at the French First Corps, the French right here, number 1 on your card, First Corps, he can have 25 infantry and militia total. That's what this little number is, 25 total in this card. And he can have 3 cavalry with it. So when this corps is on the board, you don't know that he put 25 in there until you get in a battle. When he gets in a battle, you'll look here and you'll go, okay, this is how many infantry or militia I have. This is how many cavalry I have. The morale for the infantry and cavalry are 4 in that corps. Okay, pretty simple. One thing now, militia, they're cheap and you can buy them every month. But their morale, I'll show you the morale chart, is a lot lower than your regular infantry. The French regular infantry are what? Look right here, they're a 4. And so, but they take 3 months to train. So the month you buy them and then you have to wait 2 more, you don't get them for 3 months. So they'll take a while and they're more expensive. Now, you don't want to just fill your army with militia because then your morale would suck and you'd lose the battles. So, but you do want to keep militia in there for certain reasons. That's just the way the game works. The morale, when you fought hand-to-hand back in the day, the morale was a lot. And how well your troops were trained mattered for half your fighting force was dependent on the morale of your men. So what I will do in a corps is, let's say I can have a maximum of 14 men in the 3rd Corps. I will probably make 9 or 10 of them regular infantry, and then I'll put like 4 militia. I always keep a little militia in the infantry in my regular corps. because you'll lose stuff to stupid stuff like supply and your foraging, and you have to lose a strength point because, you know, you couldn't feed enough of your men. Well, and that's when you take off militia. It's these little things that's going to help you succeed, because militia are cheap. They're the cheapest thing on the board. So you know, you can expend, they're expendable. You waste them. So that would be the 1st Infantry Corps. And let me show you the morale chart here. On your game card, there's a national morale value. All French regular infantry and artillery are a 4. The British are 4.5. Guards are 5. So look how much morale the guards have, 5. But look at militia. They're only a 2. So they're half the amount of what the French regular infantry are. But you still want some in there. Now, I want you to note, this is the French card. He can field 12 corps on the board. Most of them put 12 infantry, 15 infantry, 20 infantry, 25, 20. So he can put a lot of infantry in his corps. As comparison, look at the Spanish Corps. The Spanish 1st Corps can have 2 guard in it and 12 total infantry and 2 cavalry. So look how much smaller his corps are than the French, and he only has 8 of them. Let's take a look at the Prussians. The Prussians can put 18 and then they drop to 14 for 8 corps. Okay, not bad. Not bad, and they can have more cavalry in their corps than you notice that the Spanish could, or even the French do. But I'll show you why. Look at the Austrians. The Austrians have 9 corps, and theirs are a little bit higher at 15, so not bad. Look at the Russians. The Russians have 18 corps, then they drop to 14, but then they drop to 10. So each corps from here on out can only have 10 men. That's kind of a drawback for the Russians, but they can put a lot of corps around their empire at different spots. But look, they get 15 of them. And then the Turkish, 3 corps, they only have 3 corps. But they have a special rule where they get all these feudal corps. What's that? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. They get 13 more feudal corps. So really they can field 15 corps. But you can only have, look at 9 in these, 9, 8. But still, that's a lot of corps they can field. Now some other special corps. You'll notice that the French have an Imperial Guard. Look at the Imperial Guard. The values of that. Look at the value of that is better than, look at the morale's 5. Cavalry with its 4. The strategic value is 2. Way better than all those. And they get 20 guard and 3 cavalry in that. So I'm telling the French player right now, you want to get that build up, because that's going to bring your morale sky high. And you have a special rule that you can commit the guard. So it's very nice. Then you have artillery. 12 artillery corps. Very nice. You know, it's good to have, but not as good as to have that guard. Look at the Russians. The Russians have an Imperial Guard. They can't put 20 guard in it. They can only put 10. But still, they have an Imperial Guard, and they can commit the guard like the French. So very nice. And then they have an artillery corps. So the Russians, you know, their army is up there with the French as far as size goes. But like, if you look at Austria, they do have these 2 Grenadier Corps. Now, they can only put 5 men in them and 2 cavalry. So they're a lot smaller, and he gets 2 of them. And you're not allowed to commit them to battle like the French and Russians can. They can still be involved in battle, obviously, and you can still have the morale up to 5 with them, but a special rule to commit for the French and Russians you can't do. Now, the Austrians also get special insurrection corps and Tyrolean corps, and those are special corps that I'll just explain. Russian player, you know, I don't need to do it here and waste everybody's time. The Turks' feudal corps, I'll just explain his feudal corps to him. The Prussian corps, they do have a guard, 7 guard. They do have a Prussian guard corps, but they can't commit it like the French and the Russians do. But they do have a guard corps. And then The Spanish do not. So the next thing I want you to look at is Cavalry Corps. These are separate Cavalry Corps. Now notice the Cavalry Corps. Look at their number of movement is a 5. Very nice. Not just the French, all cavalry will move like that. But the French have 4, so these are very nice. You can commit them to the battle with the Infantry Corps, but since they can move on their own, not like these cavalry. These cavalry are stuck inside the corps. You can't move the cavalry out of the counter. But these can move on their own because they have their own counters. And they're good to protect your flanks, go grab a city off to the side real quick, screen your army. They're good for stuff like that. And they have 4. Look at the Prussians. The Prussians don't have any. That's kind of one of the drawbacks of the Prussians. All their cavalry are inside their corps. So, but they do get a special unit called the Freak Corps, and I'll explain that later to the Prussian guy. Look at the Austrian. The Austrians have 2 cavalry corps, but they do have a light infantry, which is very nice. It's not a lot of men, but the light infantry moves 5 too. So these are just to run around and cause problems and try to cut off the supply of your enemy. Look at the Russians. The Russians have 5 cavalry corps. And they have the Cossack cavalries, which are cheap. They don't need to stay in supply like the regular army. And I'll explain all that to the Russian player. And then back to him, they do have 1 cavalry corps. Okay, so the Turks and the Spanish have 1 cavalry corps. And then look at the British. The British only have 6 army corps. So that's a very small army, and they only have 1 cavalry and no Imperial Guard. I mean, even though there's guard in here, they don't have their own Imperial Guard. So very small. And then the last thing I want everybody to look at is the fleets. So the French have 4 fleets. You can put 30 ships in them. Doesn't mean you have to. You can have like 2 ships in this if you want. I won't know what you have in that. So, very nice like that. The Prussians, even though they have a fleet, they don't start with any ships. And for them to pay money to get ships, usually nobody does that. Same with the Austrians. They don't start with any ships, even though they can build them. But you don't waste money on that because you're busy fighting your land troops. The Russians do start with ships, and they have 3 fleets. The Turks do start with ships. They have 2 fleets. And then the Spanish start with ships, and they have 3 fleets. And this is where the British, kick in. They start with ships, and they have 7 fleets. So just to put this in a number for you guys, the British can put 7 fleets on the board by themselves, and they start with 100 ships. And I can divide them within these fleets as I want. Spanish will start with 59 ships, and the French will start with like 46. And if you add it up, I have a total of 100. If these two decide to ally, they have a total of about, I forget what it comes to and what their exact number was, but it's like 108. So they barely have enough more ships than I do, and my morale's better. So the Russian ships, they probably have 30 ships, and I think the Turks start with 22. So to get more ships on your side, and especially the minor countries, there's like 5 of them that can provide like 10 ships. So to get the minor countries and these guys either on my side or get them on your side, if you're worried about the shipping, is very helpful to the British and the French. The British and the French are going to try to get the guys with fleets on their side. It's very helpful for that. So that's just the basic markers and keeping track of your army inside your corps. Okay? Now we'll move to garrisons. So let's talk some detachments. Now you can see here that these cities have these spires on them. Each spire means it can hold 5 factors of men inside. So this city would be able to hold 15 men. You don't need the core counter on the board. Remember, the core is filled with strength factors also, and it's moving around the board. These factors that are without a core are in the city, and they're called garrisons. So you would want to garrison some cities. The little black niche on it, that is its siege strength. So when an opponent comes to attack this garrison, the garrison besieges itself inside the city, and then the offensive player who's attacking will lay siege to it. And the strength of the siege will depend on how many of these black notches it's had. Now I'll get into more detail of that, but right now I just want to explain the value of your garrisons. But I also want you to look at Paris here real quick. Of course, the more importance that a city has, meaning it's worth more money and more manpower points to your country, look how many spires it has. Well, it's going to be able to hold more men. If Napoleon and his army is off fighting somewhere, way out here, how is he protecting Paris? I mean, how is he protecting all of these territories from the English invading or somebody else coming in to invade? Well, what you do is you garrison them. That means you can stack a certain amount of men. For each spire you have, you can put 5 men in that city. So that's protecting this territory from getting taken. So what they're called is garrisons. So garrisons are very important in this game. So Paris, for example, should have, 10 men on it. You're allowed to put 5, 10, 15, 20. You can put 25 men in there. The garrisons will go right on the board, and they're inside the city. And so the French should probably keep, 10 men, 15 men there. The cities that are on the coast keep, 4 or 5, I would say. I would say 5 minimum, at least. And at least that's enough to hold anything, maybe another country can send over. Remember, another country can move 10 factors of men. That's just the rule. So the British can use their ships, 1 ship fleet. Remember, I have 7 fleets. One of them can carry 10 men. And so 10 men can come and invade. So the French, you can't just protect everything, right? The French players, you may leave some just 2 or 3 garrisons. It'll take. Okay. Now let's talk supply. Now this is just basic supply. Let's say we have a Turk there. This blue number in all these territories is the forage value. So if you don't want to spend money, or you ran out of money and you don't want to pay supply to supply this army, he could just try to forage, and what you have to do is roll a dice less than that. And you succeed. Your whole army just foraged. And it depends how many men you have in it and a couple other factors, but we can go through that after. Or you just pay for your supply, and if you do that by putting a supply depot on the board, then you're paying for that depot, and now that depot is supplying your army. You don't have to worry about rolling and losing men. So that's what a depot does. In your home country, it's pretty easy to stay supplied, but when you start invading and attacking, what you have to do is have a supply depot in a territory you control. It could be your home country, it could be a friendly province that you own. You can put a supply depot there, and then like every 2 territories, you have to have another supply depot as your army is moving out to fight. Now, there's details that are involved when it comes to the supply, such as port supply, units that are besieged, core units that are in a city, outside a city, stuff like that. But we'll get into the details when every player's taking their turns, and I'm working with them, and we'll explain the little details. For here's the basic supply method. As you're moving your core, you will decide if you're going to forage, and then we'll follow the foraging rules. That means you didn't pay for a supply depot, and you're not paying to supply this core. It means this core is just going to live off the land, that blue number. And then there's some modifiers depending on how far you moved and stuff like that, but you have to roll less than that number. And if you don't, you're going to lose that many factors. And it's just 1 die roll. But if the foraging value is like 3, and you have to add modifiers depending on how many spaces that core moved, depending on how many men it has, you're going to be adding modifiers to that dice roll, and you could be losing 4 or 5 men out of that army. And if that army's only holding 10, that corps, you just lost half the army. So be careful with that. But as you're moving that, you can decide to forage. If you do not forage when your movement's done, then you have to choose to supply it by the depots. And then you have to pay for that supply cost, and then there's other things for that. It could be $2, $3 that of your money you're going to spend to supply each corps. Now, if for some reason that corps cannot get supplied by a depot when you're done moving, then you have to forage it. You're forced to. So every movement phase, you will have to supply these corps when you're done moving, one way or another, always. And that's why you can lose a lot of men every turn if you just don't run your supply right. You can get hurt. And that's why I say to put militia inside your corps. Always have a few in case you lose some to supply. You just take the militia out and not your more expensive high regular infantry. And that's why other armies with your cavalry or your fast moving infantry like the Austrians have, you try to come around and you take that supply away. And when you do that, you're really going to jack up, and he's going to lose extra men just for being out of supply. And if it's winter, you're going to lose really a lot of extra men. So you want to garrison your supply depots. Just like I was talking about garrison cities, you want to keep men on these, so in case a cavalry corps runs around and tries to attack it, you can at least defend it for a while until you can get a corps with a lot more men in to come back and help. And that's what you use your minor country forces for. You usually use them to protect your supply lines and protect your bases, cities. But, sometimes you need them to help fight in the main battle too. So, anyways, that is supply. So, let's go over commanders. You can see the names on them. Napoleon, French. Wellington, British. Kutuzov, Russian. Kushnaz, Ali, Turk. Castanos, Spanish. Blucher, Prussian. Charles, Austria. So let's look at their values. Look at Napoleon. Let's start with this third number. The third number means he can command 6 corps and still keep his strategic rating and tactical rating. Strategic ratings first, tactical ratings second. He can still keep those at 5. Once he is commanding more than 6 corps under him, so if he has 7, the tactical rating will go down by 1 to a 4. Now that's not a huge, big deal. I mean, you're using that number basically to outflank and your strategic rating to withdraw. But, so if you want to command more with him, it's not like the end of the world to do it. But that's what that number means, 6. So what you would see is there's 6 infantry corps for the French. Each, the first corps can have 25 men, and the other ones have 20. I mean, Napoleon could be walking around with 90 men right here. So if you see a stack like that, that's what he's probably got close to 90 men, maybe even 100. So you may see that. And just for comparison, look at Wellington. He can only command 3 without getting dinged. Kutuzov 4, Ali 3. Look at Blucher can do 5. That's pretty good. And Charles can do 6. So Charles can command as much as Napoleon. Now the middle number is a tactical rating. Remember this, the third number we were looking at, the 6, is its tactical maximum rating. This one's called the tactical rating. And this is where 2 commanders that are in a battle will compare their tactical ratings with each other, and then those differences are added to your die roll. So, there's modifications you would like to get in your die roll, and commander tactical ratings will be one of them. So there's one, and I'll go over some others. And then the leader's first rating is strategic rating. So you have the first number is strategic rating, second number is a tactical rating, the third number is the tactical maximum rating. The strategic rating is used when you want to reinforce. You're trying to outflank your opponent. Remember, when we get into battle, you're going to pick these little battle chits that will give your forces some tactical formations. And when you try to outflank your opponent, you use the strategic number. So like Napoleon here has a 5. That's very good because you would have to roll a 5 or less on one-sided dice, and he's going to be able to reinforce that battle. Other commanders with lower numbers are going to have a less of a chance. And then you've seen on the Corps units themselves, if there's no commander and you're trying to reinforce a battle with the Corps, he has to pass his strategical rating, which was the one on the top left corner, remember? And then the leader's strategic rating is also used when you want to withdraw. So if you choose just to withdraw, depending on what your opponent has chose on his battle chit, you might have to use your strategic rating. Now the numerical, the alphabet number here on the end is the commander's overall seniority rating. So when you have a stack of commanders together, the guy that has the A rating is the overall commander. He will command the force, and then B, and then C, and so forth. Lastly, any commander that has a star on it, he is a cavalry commander, and so he will be used when you get in a battle, the enemy withdraws or is forced to retreat. You will be able to pursue him, and then the cavalry leaders with the star are used for that, to help you to succeed in your pursuit. And that's it for the leaders for now. I have an admiral, nobody else does, and he's going to help me in my naval battles. But there's an optional rule about commanders dying in battle, and I don't mind that we use it. You know, everybody can vote on these. I say we use it. It really does not help me. It's the worst for me, and it helps. It'll help the French player and probably the Russian player the most, maybe even Austria. But what that means is when you're commanding the corps here, like Napoleon's commanding, and you have to roll hard. I think you got to roll like 2 dice. You have to get a 12, and then roll 1 more dice to see how bad he's injured. And if you get a 6, he dies. So, but still, it happens, and you would hate to lose Napoleon, right? But since Napoleon has quite a few leaders, you just put a few more leaders with Napoleon. You like that? You just stack a couple more with him. And now if you lose a leader, you don't take Napoleon off, you take someone else off. So that's the way that'll work. The problem with the British is with Nelson, that's the only admiral in the game, so I can't stack him with another leader. So when he gets in a battle in the Navy, and I got to roll for him, and if I lose him, then I lose Nelson. So that's why this rule kind of sucks for me, but hey, it's part of the battle, and I don't mind if we use it. So let me give you a concept of something like the French may do. And this is some setup that I would lean to and probably use. Now, this is every corps you have on the board, okay, counting all of these. It's going to take you a while to get every corps on there, especially if you're trying to max out every corps with infantry. It's going to take you a while. Plus, if you're fighting and you're losing men, you may not even have this amount of corps on the board. But a good idea is why Napoleon is off fighting. So Vienna's here. So here's Napoleon fighting. And what I might do is, like I said, I stacked 6 corps with Napoleon, but I did throw a cavalry corps with him too. So there's 7 corps there. Now, that brings his tactical rating down to a 4. But, oh well, I can live with that. It's a good strength. He's kicking butt. He's getting close to Vienna. He has cavalry around him here to protect his flanks, cover his supply lines. Remember, we're going to have depots out here. Let me get them. So this can look maybe what your advance is looking like as you're going into Vienna. These are depots here, all right? You dropped off 5 militia to control these depots and garrison. Garrison that one with 2. You know, the less you had back here, because that's in your own country, and you're thinking, yeah, nobody's going to come around that far, but you're keeping stronger garrisons up on these depots. Now, a little bit. Now, while you're out here fighting with Napoleon, let's say the Prussians aren't in the war yet, and you want to make sure the Prussians don't do a sneak attack on you. So in reserve, you might keep 2 or 3 corps with a leader and keep them back here, let's say in this province right here, to watch your back, because Prussia could come in with an army. Now remember, their corps move 3. Okay, so if you're here and you want to move down here or cut in behind the French, you'll go 1. Forest is no problem. 2, 3. You can get that far. Then there's such a thing as forced marching, which can give you another one. So he can even get behind you here or even this far. Not a big deal because you kept a corps back here to go back and attack them. And then the same down here. Messina, he's a good leader, pretty strong leader. And he has 3 corps. And he's protecting, if you own Italy here and southern France, he stays in the vicinity. I'm not saying just there, but he stays somewhere down south where protecting anybody trying to come in this area, which is like the British. The British will take their small army, but if, you know, if he brings 2 corps and he hits up here and starts causing you problems, or comes down here or comes into Italy, anybody, and starts causing you problems, some guys say, oh, screw it, let them have it. I'm going to take Vienna here, and then I'll deal with that. I don't like that. I don't like saying, you know, oh, yeah, go ahead and take my stuff, why I lose some money from you, why I'm fighting here. I just like to have a unit ready like this, and then I'll come around and handle the situation with him. Okay? So that's why I keep some back, keep Napoleon up there fighting, cavalry helping, protecting the sides. Now the reason these 2 are off the side is it's a good idea to keep 2 corps. So during the economic expenditure phase, which happens every 3 months, you bought this corps counter, but you don't have to place the corps counter on the board. You just set it aside, it's purchased. That way during the next 3 turns, if the English invade or somebody gives you problems back here, you can pick up that corps during the reinforcement phase. Now, that happens every single turn. So you have to wait till your reinforcement phase, get that corps, and you can now put it where you have your garrison units. Put a corps there. The garrison units can be transferred inside the corps, and now your corps is there and ready to move where it needs to go real quick without bringing a leader or any corps that are out doing something else all the way back to France. You will have a corps ready. Now at the end of 3 months, if you did not use these corps that you didn't place on the board, well, they're expended, they're done. You have to pay for them again in the economic phase. But it's a wise thing to do. Remember, it only costs $1. And it's sort of a wise thing to do to have a corps ready like that when you're a country like Russia or France, where you may be fighting far away from your home. But anyways, and this would be the mechanics of the game. Always trying to cut off your opponent, cut off his supply. Remember to always protect your supply. Remember to always watch your bases, because if you don't, someone's going to jack you. All right? All right, that is it for this video. I'm trying to keep it as short as possible and just give us the quick basic fundamentals so we can start playing this game. It's 33 minutes long, and if I don't say so myself, I think that's pretty good considering how detailed this game is. But I have one more video next to show everybody, and it's going to be on strategies and on the fleets.